So we've got a morning together, and I like to teach interactively. So that means that you get to ask questions along the way, and we'll see how things go here. I am a total Bible geek. There is no doubt about it. How many of you know Bible Project? The videos you played, yeah, sketchbook videos. Okay, I've been a part of Bible Project and still am, and just love what's happening there. You mentioned doctrine. Just let me show you something, because part I want to do here is just kind of resource you guys. If you go to Mark Driscoll's website, markdriscoll.org, and hopefully it's still there. Yeah, if you come down here to what do Christians believe about, most of that is doctrine. And we redid doctrine when he started out his daily devotional. And over the first 18 months, it was just doctrine updated. Because like in the chapter 3, the creation, when we wrote that, Biologos didn't exist. So there was some stuff that was way out of date, and there were some mistakes in there, so we corrected that. And Mark is putting those chapters, or the questions, up again, so you can find doctrine for free now. So if you come to marriage, for example, you'll see that there's, well, just one question right now. What does the Bible say about marriage? He's putting stuff up as it gets finished, because they've got to reformat it for the website and all that. So that's doctrine. Much of it. There's some other things in there too. So that's a resource, and part of what Mark is doing, and I appreciate it, is he's making resources available for free. So we discussed where to reprint doctrine with somebody and decided, no, let's make it free. So it's a good resource. And all the stuff with the blow up at Mars Hill and all that kind of stuff, that's all in the past. And Mark is pastoring Trinity Church there in Scottsdale. Very, 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 very different place than Mars Hill. And so there's a lot of resources there. So when you go to, if you want to get some doctrine for free, it's there. Or you can buy it. What I want to do today is just play some Bible. Is that okay? Okay. What I want to do is come back and look at some foundational stuff in Scripture. And you guys use ESV here, is that right? The Elect Standard Version? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The NIV is the nearly inspired version, right? Yeah. The Babylon Bee did a thing on translations. The King James Version is Know Jesus Well. The New King James Version is Never Know Jesus Version. Why would anybody tamper with what God gave us? So, serpent, Genesis chapter 3. Crafty, good or bad? Wait a minute, that's the wisdom in Proverbs. It's the same word as the wisdom word in Proverbs. The serpent was, another way you could translate that was he was wise. See, where did the serpent come from? We don't actually know. No, God didn't make everything. No, did God make Satan? Trick question. Did God make Satan? What did God make? Now, Lucifer is a Latin translation of shining one from Isaiah 14. That's not even a biblical word. God created angels. God created angels, and apparently, you've got these angels that carry the throne. You see it in Ezekiel chapter 1. You see the God-mobile that's carried by angels. And it apparently, it's really hard to tell just what's going on, Apparently, one of those throne-bearing angels wanted to be on the throne. And that's the angel that God created who ended up becoming Satan. What's Satan's name, by the way? Because Satan's a title, it's not a name. What's Satan's name? Well, that's the just translation of devil is deceiver. Satan is accuser. What is Beelzebub? Is actually it's Lord of shit. It's an insult. Yeah. Beelzebul is Lord of the gods, but that's actually that's an insult they use there in Matthew chapter 12. He does it by Lord of shit. Yeah, it's. Morning star is a description of him. That's from Isaiah 14. That's what gets translated as Lucifer in the Latin, in the Vulgate. What's his name? Fred? yeah, probably. Yeah, why does the Bible not use his name? Do you have names of any angels? Yeah. What are some good angels? Michael, Gabriel. There's one more in the Apocrypha. What's the other named angel in the Apocrypha? Raphael. Mm-hmm. God heals. Why do we not have? And we've got gods on the bad side: Moloch and Chemosh and Aphrodite. And, well, that's not biblical. Astarte. I mean, we've got a number of names of other high-level angel beings, but we don't have the name of the chief dude. Do you ever wonder why? I wonder about everything. I think the reason that it's just called the serpent here is we do not have his name. What's the name of the guy that got beat up by Moses in Exodus? What's the name of the guy that got beat up by Moses in Exodus? Pharaoh's his title. That just means king. What's his name? It's actually never in Scripture. Why do you think Moses knew the name of the guy? Yeah. And when he wrote the Pentateuch, could he have put his name in there? Yeah. Why didn't he? No honor. It's a studied insult. It's a studied insult. This is a bad guy. May his name ever be forgotten. Why do we not have the name of the chief dude on the kingdom of darkness? I'm inclined to think he's a bad dude. It's a studied insult. May his name ever be forgotten. May his name never be spoken. It's the same reason I would like to see in these killings and such that they would not use the name of the person who killed it. I think we should not use that name. Can't get away with it. But may his name never be spoken. So the serpent, or the devil, the deceiver, the adversary, Satan, there are other names for, other titles for him, but no name. And I think that's a studied insult. What name do we want to speak? Jesus. Yeah, that's a good name. Yahweh. So the serpent is crafty. Is he a good guy or bad guy? We don't know. I mean, we're following the story. So if you translate this to be a legit translation, the serpent was wiser than any beast of the field that God had made. That'd be a legit translation there. What does he say to the woman? What does he say? Really? Really? No, he's not even saying that. He's not saying don't listen to God. He's asking a question. Did God really say? Now, questions, are good ways to cause trouble. Why am I asking all these questions? Did God really say? So think a minute. And my thing here is, read Scripture slowly and wonder, ponder. What's he after?
Questioning God's reasoning.
What is he suggesting here?
God didn't really mean that. She didn't hear correctly.
Yeah, when I look at this, it seems to me what he's saying is, did you hear him right? Does Eve know what God said? Oops, wrong book. Does Eve know what God said? Does Eve know? Yeah. hmm You can say, well, she didn't get it exactly right, but she got the gist of it. And she adds on, you shall not touch it. But what did he say about the tree? Yeah. Yeah. So you come back up here, and 2:17. Here's what God said. So if I look at the tree here, God's interpretation of the tree, so he's got a tree. What does he say about the tree? He says, dangerous tree. What do you say to do with the tree? What do you say to do with the tree? Don't eat it. Don't eat it. Why? Yeah, it will kill you. Now, Satan he didn't mention that tree, but it's pretty clear it's what he's referring to. So you got all these trees, and where's the tree of the knowing good and evil? Right in the middle of the garden. Do you think they've noticed it? Yeah, it's right in the middle of the garden. And then God says, don't eat it. And did God really say? And it seems to me here what he's doing, as I think about this, is what kind of God would put this tree here and then say, what about it? Don't eat it. See, and what happens is when you get in these kinds of conversations, is trying to make you think about stuff. And so, does Eve know about the tree? Does she know accurately about the tree? Does she know that it's a dangerous tree, don't eat it, it will kill you? Yeah. Why did God say don't eat that tree? And what's his motive behind it? Protective. Now there's a ton of questions. Why is that tree there? Where did it come from? All those kinds of things. And what's the answer? We don't know. It doesn't matter. God said don't eat it, so what should you do? Don't eat it. Okay, that's good. So she gets it. But the serpent says, you'll not die. Okay. Now this is what I understand when I look at this. This is God's interpretation of the tree. When I look at Satan's interpretation of the tree, does he say it's a dangerous tree? What does he say? Yeah, he says it's a good tree. God said, don't eat it. What does Satan say? Eat it. Why? It will make you like God. Now, are they like God? Good thing or bad thing? Like God. Good thing or bad thing? We've got a mixed house here. Do you guys ever agree on anything? Good thing or bad thing? Why do you say good thing? They are made in the likeness of God back in Genesis 1. They're already like God. So what's wrong with this? See, the thing is, like God in what sense? Now, does that mean we'll be like God in essence? No, of course not. Nobody's like God in essence. I mean, he only is creator of heaven and earth. Like God, in the likeness of God, means we act for God. We make him visible. We do his work in the world, those kinds of things. But like God here has to do with the tree of knowing good and evil. And it's helpful to me to think, what does the tree of knowing good and evil mean? It's actually an idiom. It's like the age of accountability. And the thing is, who defines good, right, true, beautiful, real? Well, that's the question, knowing good and evil. That's what the idiom means. So in Isaiah 7:14, it talks about Messiah will be born of a virgin. And the boy, back in Isaiah's day, before the boy knows good and evil, you'll see these kings destroyed. What does that mean? Before this boy can decide good and bad, before he reaches the age of accountability, so to speak, you'll see these kings destroyed. That's the idiom. David gets old and it says he does not know good and evil. What does that mean? If David does not know good and evil, what does that mean? Alzheimer's. That's what it means. It means he is in dementia. And he has to have somebody to take care of him. So he has a nurse that takes care of him because he can no longer make decisions. He's demented. Well, not demented, that's the wrong word. He's in dementia. So knowing good and evil is just being able to make decisions, moral decisions. So the question is, who will define what is good, right, true, beautiful, and real? So who should define what's good, right, true, and beautiful? God, and he'll tell you what to do. See, this is really, really important in our world today. Who will tell you what is good, right, true, beautiful, and real? What does the serpent suggest? What does the serpent suggest? You know, it's yeah, you guys are getting it. When
Like, the devil as the world's first deconstructionist.
say it one more time. I didn't.
It's almost like Satan is the world's first deconstructionist.
Yes, Satan is the world's first deconstructionist. That's exactly correct. Is now Sherry and I met in December 15th of 1967. Not that I keep track of anything. And our first date was Jungle Book. You've all seen the book. You've all seen the movie, right? You've got it memorized, right? Say yes. Make me happy. Okay, good. Is there a serpent in Jungle Book? Yeah. Does that have biblical background? Do you think Rudyard Kipling was telling a biblical story? He absolutely was. And the serpent is named Kaa in Jungle Book. And what does Kaa do to Mowgli? Do you remember? He hypnotizes him. And that's when, the tiger comes along and thonks him on the head. But I don't think the serpent is hypnotizing Eve here. I think the serpent's doing exactly the opposite. The serpent here is telling the woman, well, let's look at it. What did the woman do? What did she do? She looked at the tree and saw it's a good for food and a delight to the eyes. Okay, so that you hyperlinkers should quickly hyperlink back up to chapter 2, verse 9. And what do you see about the trees of the garden? Pleasant to the sight and good for food. So all of the trees are pleasant to the sight and good for food. She looks and sees this tree is what? What does she conclude here? It's just like all the other trees. It's just like all the other trees. How did she figure that out? She figured it out for herself. And what else did she come to the conclusion of? It makes you wise in what sense? In what sense? I can define for myself what is good, right, true, and beautiful and real. And that's what it means when it will make you like God. Means he wants you to grow up. And this is my inclination thing, and he wants you to grow up and be authentic, mature, self-actualized. When you see self-actualized, what does that make you think of? Not Freud. Maslow. Hierarchy of needs. The bottom is what? Food, shelter, that sort of thing. And you go up the hierarchy, significance, community, and such. What is the top of his hierarchy? It's self-actualization. What does that mean? You live for yourself. If we did this God's thing, bottom thing would still be food and shelter and those kinds of things, significance, community. But what's at the top of God's hierarchy of needs? Him. Getting good relationship with God. Okay. The serpent is saying, I think what he's saying here is, whom will you trust? And what is his suggestion is what Eve does. She saw the fruit, she took of the fruit. Okay. Now, think with me just a minute here. Who's a party to the conversation? What did Adam say? Down through verse. What did Adam say? He didn't say anything, so he's not a party to the conversation. Who's a party to the conversation? What did God say? He didn't say anything, so he's not a party to the conversation. Serpent, yeah, serpent. Who else? Eve. Who else? Nobody. No, well, the tree, yeah. Not sure what the tree said. Nobody else. Now, think with me just a minute. What would have happened we can play with it and wonder, what would have happened when the serpent said, did God actually say you shouldn't eat a tree in the garden? What would have happened if Eve would have said, just a minute, Mr. Serpent, Mr. God, Mr. Serpent has a question for you. Would anything have changed? Everything would have changed. What? Yeah, it's a short Bible. I could do with that. I really could. Yeah, it would have been a very different Bible. We'd have been right to Revelation, kind of. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would have been very, very different. What would have happened if Eve would have said, Mr. Serpent, just a second. Husband, Mr. Adam, Mr. Serpent, I need your help. Would anything have changed? Everything would have changed. Everything would have changed. See, when I look at this passage and I think about it here, what Satan is doing all the way through here is his agenda is to isolate us from God and neighbor. Decide for yourself. I know me better than anyone knows me. I think that's what he's saying. So God has an interpretation of the tree. Dangerous tree, don't eat it, it will kill you. Satan has an interpretation of the tree. What is it? Good tree. Eat it, it'll make you like God. I don't think the serpent is hypnotizing Eve. I think it's exactly the opposite. The serpent is calling her to be fully rational on our own. The serpent is saying, don't trust anybody. Check it out for yourself. Don't let anybody run your life. You got to be who you are, then you can have relationship. So, yeah. Who decides truth? Well, what does the serpent suggest? Check it out for yourself. And so what he's trying to do, I think, is to isolate us from everybody else and trust yourself. Decide for yourself. I'll just leave it at that. That's his agenda. Now, I don't know how much you follow local culture. What's the cultural narrative these days? Do you. Mm-hmm. Do you. That is a cultural narrative that's everywhere. And how do you relate to other people? It's usually with anger. It's usually with distrust. Who do you trust? According to the cultural narrative, who do you trust? Nobody, really. You expect everybody to betray you. In today's culture, I'm thinking popular media, I'm thinking what you see on Netflix and the endless reruns, well, not the reruns, but the current stuff. Most of what I see, and I watch very little TV. I never ever do a season of anything in a night. But I kind of keep track of what's going on. And the current group of music videos, the current group of video games, don't trust anybody because everybody will betray you. That's the current narrative. You can't trust anybody. Who's singing that song? Well, it's a serpent song. That's a serpent song. Don't trust anybody. Does it sell here in the United States? Big time. Big time. Big time. What will pastors do according to the cultural narrative? What's the cultural narrative about the church? Yeah. Yeah. When a pastor makes the front page of the New York Times, what did he do? You know, he's ripped off money, he's power abuse, he's, all the stuff. How often has Matt Chandler made the front page of the New York Times? See, why isn't Matt Chandler's story being sung? Why did Mark Driscoll make the front page of the New York Times? Because of power abuse. Did Mark abuse power? Say yes. He did. I can say from personal experience, Mark has been through an incredible transforming experience since then. Spent a year in intense psychotherapy with a psychologist who specializes in Microsoft executives and Hollywood celebrities. He was not even slightly impressed that he was talking with Mark Driscoll. He's a believer. And Mark spent a year of intense therapy with that guy. And he's a different guy. If you follow, and I've followed Mark because we've been friends for a long time. I followed Mark's social media. None of the snarky crap that he did all the time has shown up in the stuff. None of the sarcastic jabs, none of the I'm the best kind of stuff that kind of typified especially the early days at Mars Hill. How often have you heard that story? See, you hear the downside, and Mark did it. I mean, the stuff was often played up worse than it was. But Mark did it. There's no doubt about it. But you don't hear the redemption story. Now, it's a story in progress, to be sure. And I'm from Missouri. I'm suspicious. Is the power stuff really gone? I mean, I'd stand up. I've said to Mark, and I'll say it to you, is it really gone? Well, we'll see. But it's not come out so far. And I know he's had opportunity to play the power games, and so far he hasn't done it. I'm inclined to think that God has really made a change in his life. I really pray that's true. The level of influence I have in his life, I'm trying to do that. Do you hear that story? Do you hear the redemption story? Nowhere. Nowhere. How come? It doesn't sell. It doesn't sell. It doesn't fit the serpent song. And see, that's part of what we do as a church. That's part of what we do as Jesus followers, is we don't back away from the bad stuff. We don't back away from the sin at all. And we shouldn't. We mustn't, because sin is real. But what we celebrate is the redemption story. What we celebrate is the new man or woman in Jesus' story. What we believe is that there's no sinner so messed up, so broken, so vile, so evil, that the gospel can't make a change in their life. So we go into sin knowing it's real. In fact, we probably see sin more realistically than the world does, or should. But we come in with a gospel redemption story. And that's what I want to celebrate. Now, I tell some of the Mark story just because I was Sherry's brother and sister in Tucson. We went down there this summer, and I drove up to Scottsdale and went to Trinity Church and then had lunch with Mark and Grace afterwards. And we keep track of each other by text and phone message and that sort of thing. So I'm a friend, but I'm keeping track of this, and I'm real suspicious because I know how deep the power stuff was in Mark, but I'm seeing a changed man. I want those stories told. Now, there's a lot of work yet to be done. There's a lot of reconciliation that hasn't happened. There's a lot of brokenness, a lot of pain with the power abuse stuff that brought Mars Hill down. And there's a whole lot of story around there that's never been told. But see, what I want to do is I want to celebrate the change stories and not do it naively. And so when I think about this particular passage and what happens, to me, I want to hear the rest of the story. Their eyes are open. They knew they were naked. They make fig leaves. How's that going to work out? And you know what happens when we try to take care of ourselves is making fig leaves, and that narrative has been told many times. This is really stupid to try to cover up with fig leaves. I mean, do you have leaves here? Are there trees here in Las Vegas at all? Yeah, a few poplars, yeah. I mean, there's not much happening here, but, go to some places. So, does God know that they've eaten? Mm-hmm. So, when God sees that they have eaten, he what? What's the first thing he does? He comes walking in the garden. This is the first thing that God does. He comes. Okay. Now, that is absolutely astonishing. That is absolutely astonishing. Can the holy God have sin in his presence? Can the holy God have sin in his presence? No, we're looking at this story. Can the holy God have sin in his presence? God, well, it didn't say God the Father, it's God here. Can the awesome holy God have sin in his presence? You're all saying, what in the world is Gary up to here? You're right. Be suspicious. Think. So I heard a no. Why no? Where? You might be thinking of Habakkuk chapter 1, 10 or so, where Habakkuk responds when he says you're going to send, he's going to send the Babylon. Who are you of purer eyes than to see evil and cannot look at it wrong? How can you cannot look on evil? Yeah. So you're the awesome holy God. You cannot look on evil. But look at this passage. What does God do? Where?
In the garden.
What is in the garden? Adam and Eve. What are Adam and Eve? Sinners. They have just betrayed him horribly. Can God have sin in his presence? Fortunately, yes. Fortunately, yes. In fact, I suggest to you that God's holiness is what moves him to come to the place of sin to bring redemption. Now, at the end of the day, he will not have sin in his presence. At the end of the day, it will be outside the gates, to use the Revelation terminology. At the end of the day, but here we've got the awesome holy God coming to sinners. Why? Because in his holiness, he wants to bring redemption. And this is one of the places I really want you to ponder this and think about it, because I hear all the time the aphorism, God cannot have sin in his presence, therefore we must be clothed in Jesus Christ so that he sees Jesus, not us, then we can come into his presence. That's one of those half-truths that I think is a lie that Satan uses powerfully. Because if you sin, that means you can't come to Jesus. You can't come to God. You can't come to God. And I think it's exactly the opposite. I think for the person who, I think God pursues sinners to bring redemption. And the question is, what do you got to do? So he comes to the garden. What do? They hide. Why? Yeah, fear, guilt, shame, all those things. They hide. So Lord, what's the next thing he does? He calls. And calls what? Now, again, ponder. Does God know they're in the bushes over there? So why does he say, where are you? We're in the bushes. You know, is that the answer he wants to hear? No. What's he asking for? Yeah, he's not asking their physical presence. You got it. He's not asking their physical presence. He's asking their personal presence. Where are you relationally? Where are you spiritually? He's asking not their physical presence, but their personal presence. And it seems to me what he's doing in this place when he says, where are you? He is inviting confession. He's saying, where are you spiritually? And that's what confession is. Okay. How does Adam do? Because he confesses here in verse 10. How does Adam do? When? Now, wait a minute. Wait. Look here. Let's look at this. That's what he says. Where's the passing the buck? No, in verse 10. How does he do here? Yeah. Let's look at what he does. I heard the sound of you in the garden. That's the context. Okay. And then he says, I was afraid. What's that? What's that? That's not guilt. That's emotion. I'll take that. Okay. Because I was naked. That's his identity. This is not physical nakedness. This is I'm vulnerable and I'm going to get hurt. Naked can be without clothes, but naked means I'm vulnerable and I'm going to get hurt. And I hid myself. What's that? That's action. Yeah, the shame is there, sure. So he talks about the context, the emotion, the identity, and the action. How's he doing? So far, so good. I mean, he's actually doing well so far. What's he missing? What's he missing? I ate, and it was wrong. So far, so good. So far, so good. Now, this is a lesson. What does God do? What's he going for? What's he going for? The identity. Mm-hmm. See, what God does is he goes for the identity statement. Now, this is the key thing, is you will always act according to your identity on the long haul under normal circumstances. That's what has to change when you come with Jesus. What's servant's identity for you? Self-actualized, autonomous individual. Do me. That's the serpent's identity. I gotta be me. What's God's identity for you? What's God's identity? What's God's identity? A hope for every man here. Son of God. Son of God. God proud of you? Does God see your sin? Absolutely. Is God proud of your sin? No. What does he do when he sees your sin? He comes and calls and goes for an identity statement. Because what do he want you to do? He wants you to confess the sin and live in your identity. What does Satan want you to do? Do you? Yeah. Leave God out of your life, because he's just going to thump you. The awesome holy God cannot tolerate sin in his presence. Therefore, he hates you. The narrative works, because it totally makes sense. And that's part of the reason this narrative that God cannot have sin in his presence is such a powerful tool for Satan to exploit. And there's a truth to it. At the end of the day, God will not have sin in his presence. You can't just walk into God's presence and say, dude, I'm here, But if you come with confession, what does God do? He welcomes you. Son, I'm glad you're here. Let's talk. He goes for identity statement. And then what does he do? What's he doing here? Seems to me, of course I have an opinion on everything, occasionally I'm right. It seems to me at this spot, he is inviting more confession. What did Adam leave out? I ate, it was wrong. And God comes inviting more confession. See, this will bring you back to your picture of God, which was absolutely fundamental, is what is your picture of God. And for many, the picture of God is the high, holy, distant, angry God who cannot tolerate sin in his presence. And that's taught, and there's a truth to it. The other really bad picture is the grandpa God. And that's what you get in the progressive churches. Oh, you want to marry a guy? Oh, sure, whatever. As long as you guys love each other, I guess I'm okay with that. Just come over for dinner when you're done, That's probably not the narrative you're getting here at Grace Point. So he invites more confession. How does How does God do? Or how does Adam do? It's the woman that you gave me. Could he have done worse? Probably not. Blames him. Who does he blame? God and the woman, everybody around. He doesn't blame the serpent, interestingly. To me, that's really, really, really significant. He does not blame the serpent. He blames God and the woman. See, again, this is so significant, it seems to me. Because again, I think reading the Bible closely is a really good thing to do. When he does this, he blames, he doesn't take any responsibility. He blames God and woman, not serpent. See, and that's just a desperate mistake. Who do we fight against? Ephesians 6:12. Who do we fight against? Not against flesh and blood. Okay. So God said to the woman, what is this you have done? What's he doing here? Inviting confession. Inviting confession. How does she do? Actually, I think she did really well. I think she nailed it. The serpent deceived me. Yep, that's what he does. That's what he does. And I ate. I think she does really well. I think she does really well. Adam starts well and then goes completely off the rails, which says the first start may not have been all that good. But when God comes back and asks for more confession, it's done. It's bad. Eve gets it right. Serpent deceived me, I ate. So who does God turn to? Serpent. Why? That's the real enemy. That's the real enemy. And what does he do to the serpent? Curses him. What does he do to the woman? Is there a curse here? Is there a curse here? Mm-mm. No curse. What does he do to the man? Curse here? No. What's cursed? Ground. Who is the first human that is cursed in the scripture? It's not Adam and Eve. Cain. Cain is cursed. How so? The ground will not give its fruit for you. You will be an aimless wanderer. Adam and Eve are not cursed. The serpent is cursed. The ground is cursed, not Adam and Eve. Why? We're still his kids. He's going after us. Now, there is punishment. There is absolute punishment. And that's where we get, I assume that you've played with this, back here in verse 15. I'll put in between you and the woman. Who is the you? Serpent. Between your offspring. What's that? What's that? Little snakes? Actually, in one sense, yes. Those are the demon gods. Not little slithery things. And of course, this whole thing is not why snakes don't have legs. This is, I'm going to make you eat dirt. It's what one lineman says to another one as they look at each other across the football. You're going to eat dirt, man. I'm going to humiliate you. And so it's not, it's the gods, it's the demon gods, and what? Who else is involved in the offspring here? Those who worship the demon gods. Those who worship Moloch and Chemosh and Baal and Astarte and Ashtoreth and all them. Those who worship and serve other gods are the offspring here. Who's the other offspring? Us? Really? Why did you say us? That's what I'm asking. Who is the offspring? Messiah. Messiah and what? Those who worship him, those who follow him. Are we her offspring? The answer is yeah. Yep, yep, we are. So that's talking about two kingdoms. This is the dominion of darkness. This is the kingdom of light. And then he is who? Who is that? Messiah will bruise your head. What happens to a serpent when Messiah bruises his head? What happens to a serpent when Messiah bruises his head? Kills him. Kills him. Yeah. He will kill you. And you, who is that? Serpent, will bruise his heel. What does that do? It kills him. I hear preached all the time, all the serpent can do is tap him on the heel. This is a viper. When a viper taps you on the heel, it kills you. And as Messiah is crushing the head of the serpent bites him and kills him. So what's the first theme of atonement in Bible? What's the first theme of atonement? Triumph, or sometimes called Christus Victor. The first atonement theme in Scripture is the triumph theme, or the Christus Victor theme. We've got to have that in there. We're crushing the serpent. What's the second theme in Scripture? Substitution. His death in our place. It's not penal yet. That comes later. But triumph and substitution, they're from the beginning. There are many other atonement themes, things that Christ accomplished in his coming and atoning. But that's where that comes from. So this is what we're going to take a break here in a second. What do you do when you run into sin? What should you do? You should do what? Confess. Which means what? Tell whom? And whom should you tell beside God? The person you've sinned against. I suggest to you that there should be a priest involved. Who is a priest?
High priest.
Well, Jesus, of course, is high priest, but who's a priest? A spiritually mature person that you trust and don't have to edit when you talk with. A priest is a believer in Jesus Christ, and of course a priest is any believer in Jesus Christ. The Roman Catholic mistake, and many times the Protestant mistake, is you've got to have a reverse collar and be ordained. That's got to be somebody like me or Ty or Tim or Travis or somebody who's ordained. The priest is any believer in Jesus Christ. We're a kingdom of priests. Yeah, and what that means is I need somebody to help me do my spiritual work. I need a spiritual helper, another man maybe, who can help me do business with God, who can help me get it all out, who can help me go into places that are so painful I don't want to talk about it, and talk to God. And God is the one who wants to do what? Heal and forgive. He's the one who wants to crush the serpent and cleanse and heal and make whole again. See, that's what I find here in the Genesis 3 story. I mean, it's a hugely powerful story. Hugely powerful story. But the picture there is that Satan's thing is to deceive you about the nature of the tree. Don't trust anybody. Isolate. Don't trust. It's our cultural narrative. Live that way. God comes inviting confession, and when we confess, then he heals. There are consequences to sin. The confession and healing may not take care of the consequences, so many times that helps there too. But it heals the relationship, and then God becomes your helper. So, there you go. There's a sin pattern here that I want you to ponder while you're thinking about, or taking a break here. The woman sees. That's the first piece of the narrative. See and take. Who saw? Woman saw, she took. That's the sin narrative. We find it happening regularly. There's a different narrative, but we'll look at that after break, okay? So we looked at Genesis 3 to get a picture there of sin and God's response to sin. And part of what I want you guys to do is be like God. And when you see sin, to approach it the way God approaches it, to come and invite confession, to come and be a spiritual helper to people who are trapped in sin, and hope that you'll see them get free. The sin pattern that I talked about is she saw, she took. That's the sin pattern. What I want to do now is look at the obedience pattern, and we look at Acts chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12. It's a very different story. So